Hey guys, in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to make a very simple wrapped loop and S-hook clasp. These are a great way to save money on making your own findings, and also just to add that extra touch of handmade artistry to your pieces. So to start out, we're going to make our wrapped loop, first of all, and I'm going to be using 20 gauge wire. This is silver filled from Rio Grande, for those who are curious. You can really make these out of whatever gauge you want and whatever size you want, but I'll just give you some guidelines just so you can get started with something until you figure out your personal preference. So again, I'm going to be using 20 gauge, and for this wrapped loop we're going to take about 2 1/4 inches. I like my clasp to be, I guess, fairly small to medium size. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do to make our wrapped loop here is to form the rounded portion through which our clasp is going to go. So I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and as always I'm going to have the specific tools I'm using and any supplies you need in the description below. So I'm going to take my round nose pliers and grip the wire about in the middle, slightly off to one side. And using the widest part of my round nose pliers, I'm just going to form a circle with the wires. And again, the exact size of this is completely up to you. I usually like mine to be at least 1/4 inch in diameter. You can see here I have a fairly perfect circle, and one tail is longer than the other, and they're both crossing over each other relatively in a straight line. So at this point I'm going to bend up the longer tail right at the junction, and we're just going to take that straight up. And I'm going to switch to my chain nose pliers now. And we're going to wrap this tail around the base of the longer tail. So I'm going to grip this right like so, and just do your basic wrapped loop, making sure it's nice and snug and that you keep your circular shape as you do this. And we're going to continue wrapping this shorter tail snugly until we have at least 2 complete wraps. Just to make sure it has plenty of stability, because the clasp is really the part of the necklace or bracelet that's going to be getting the most wear. So once we have 2 full wraps, I'm going to take my flush cutters and trim that off quite close. And then I'm just going to use my chain nose pliers to snug down the last bit there, just so you don't have any sharp bits poking up. Now we're going to make the second side of our wrap loop. This larger one, of course, is where the clasp is going to go through, and the smaller one we're going to make is what you'll attach to your necklace chain or bracelet chain. So same deal as before, we're going to bend this tail off to the side, and you do want to leave a little bit of a straight space going up so that we can do a little bit more wrapping. So I'm going to form a second smaller wrapped loop at this end. And at this point, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and slide your chain onto here. But if you want to go ahead and close this off, you can simply use a jump ring to reattach your chain. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up by wrapping this around just like we did with the first one. And just as before, we want to make sure we have at least two wraps on there so that it's plenty sturdy. And if yours gets a little crooked like mine did, you can just take your round nose pliers and realign the two loops. And we're going to the back here. You can see we've got a little bit of a tail left, so I'm just going to, well, actually we can probably just squeeze that in here. So let me just finish that by pushing it on down with my chain nose pliers. There we go. So we have a quite simple wrapped loop, and if you wanted to, I would recommend it. You could go ahead and hammer this out to add some extra strength to it. So let me show you how to do that. So you would very simply put it on the edge of your block. Let me zoom in a little bit. And avoid hammering the portion that you wrapped. And you could use either the flat side or the domed side if you wanted a smooth effect or a dappled effect. So I'm just going to hammer this out. Now that we have our wrapped loop all finished, we can move on to the actual hook portion that we're going to use to go through this and actually fasten our necklace or bracelet. So I'm going to again take 20 gauge wire here, and for this one we want probably 2.5 inches. So I'll just snip that off with my flush cutters. And for the clasp here, we're going to actually start with the end that attaches to the chain. So we're going to make a very small wrapped loop to attach to the chain here. I'm going to start about, 3/4 of an inch up, maybe a full inch. And we're going to bend this to one side, wrap it around, just like so. If you wanted to at this point, you could simply slide your chain on here and then continue to close this up. I'm going to go ahead and close it because you can always use a jump ring later to attach your chain. And just like any other wrapped loop, we're going to wrap this tail on around our shank. And you want to get at least 3 complete wraps on this. At this point, I'm going to take my round nose pliers, stick them right in here, and I'm going to gently bend this off to one side. Then I'm going to move my round nose pliers up here and start bending it off to the other side. And you want a nice smooth arch, just like that. Once you've got your wire down here meeting at this point, you're going to take the last little bit and make a curve going up this direction. So I'm going to flip mine over just to do that easily. So we're going to curve it this way. And you want it to end up here, so I have a little bit of extra wire that I'm just going to snip off. And move my loop up a little bit. And again, you can really make these any size you want. I just prefer mine to be, I guess, a little bit more on the dainty side. And at this point I'm just tweaking it a little bit, just so I'm happy with the general shape it takes. Oops, apologies, I keep going out of screen there. Again, I'm alternating between looking at what I'm doing through the camera viewfinder and trying to peer around the camera, so it's a little bit challenging to keep everything in screen sometimes. So there we have it. And just like our previous one, I'm going to go ahead and hammer this out. There we are. And you can see my loop opened up a little bit here while hammering it. That's quite typical. It's very easy to close that back up. There we go. And let me get these steel blocks out of the way. And let's go ahead and test this on out. It quite simply slides on over. And you'd have chain on this end and chain on this end. And it's very easy to unfasten and fasten. Now, a variant of this that I actually prefer is your S-shaped hook, where instead of having this wrapped loop here, we would merely have another hook like this going the other direction. So let me show you how to make that. For this version, I like to use 18 gauge wire or thicker, just because you don't have the wrapped loop. You want the thicker wire to make sure that your clasp isn't going to become deformed while you're using it and result in a lost necklace. So I'm going to cut 3 inches of 18 gauge wire. And for this one, we're going to start by making a loop on one end, just like so. And we're going to make a loop on the other end going in the opposite direction. So this one's going down. We're going to make this one go up. And you want to make sure that they're roughly the same size. Now you want to find the middle of your piece in between the two loops, and you're going to start bending this. What you want to do is wind up with these little loops pointing out on each side. So for this one, we're going to bend it down, and I'm bending it. If this was the middle, then I'd dissect it again and take the middle of that distance for where we're going to first bend it. And once you get it started, you can pretty much see where you're going to be going. And we're just going to bring it all the way around, like so. And I'm going to flip this now. And for this one, remember we want these pointing out, so this is going to go up. So again, taking the middle distance here, just going to start curving this on over. And you can see we're getting our nice S shape. And if you feel that one side wound up larger than the other, you can very simply tweak it to adjust for that. You may have noticed from my tutorials I do a lot of tweaking. It's an art form, and therefore very few things are exact. And very few things wind up looking perfect the first time you do it. So don't be afraid to make adjustments. There we go. So I'm fairly happy with that. And again, I'm going to hammer this out. Okay, and you can see as before that it kind of opened up a little bit. That's really not a problem at all. We just snug everything back up. And a tip when closing these up, you want to actually push it past the meeting point and then let it relax a little bit. And that will make it nice and snugly closed up. Just like so. And let's try this out on our wrapped loop. And for this one, of course, you would make 2 of these wrapped loops, 1 on each side. And the reason I prefer this S-hook as opposed to this one is that, for one thing, it's very nice for either right-handed or left-handed folks because you can, because it's an independent piece, you can fasten it or unfasten it from either side of the necklace. And also, it just seems easier to, I guess because it's larger, it's easier to get a hold of it and easier to fasten in general. And again, these work very nicely for bracelets because they're much more easy to operate with one hand than a lobster clasp or a spring clasp would be. So there you have it. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. As always, don't forget to like this video and click subscribe. I do have many more instructional and project tutorials planned for the near future. Let me know how this goes for you, and if you have any questions at all about how to make this S-hook clasp and wrapped loop. So thanks for watching, and happy crafting!